This is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, a series where I break down a classic Goosebumps book and any episode that goes along with it. I will also be telling up some of our Goosebumps cliches and classic moments. This week, I'm excited to visit It Came From Beneath the Sink. I was looking forward to this book, largely because I had positive memories of it from childhood. I couldn't remember much of the plot besides there being an evil potato sponge monster, but really, that's all I needed to know. There's some other fun elements at play with some cursed bad luck. This book also had a surprising amount of blood compared to the other ones in the series. I definitely recommend you check it out if you haven't yet. It Came From Beneath the Sink is a great cover in my opinion. I love the evil green eyes peering out from the darkness. Even if this depiction of the girl is much larger than the one described in the book, it's able to make a fairly silly title menacing, so I think it needs praise for that all on its own. It also has a unique color combo going on that I really appreciate. The 2003 slime border works fine for me. I think the blue and orange combo is a little boring in comparison to the original, and the eyes don't seem to glow as much as a result of this, so the original takes first place for me. There is no later 2000s version to check out, but It Came From Beneath the Sink did get a couple pieces of merchandise. These included an awesome hat with the Gruel's eyes. It also had another one of these Halloween cards, but this one says, "It came from beneath the sink. To wish you a happy and lucky Halloween." The fan club promo in the back of the book this week stood out to me, probably because of what an awesome deal it was. For $11, you basically get a Goosebumps baseball hat, neon pen, glow-in-the-dark door hanger, a signed photo of R.L. Stine, a membership card, and access to newsletters full of games, puzzles, stats, messages from Stine, and info on upcoming books. I'm really sad that I missed this by probably just a couple of years. Our front tag says, "It's warm, it's breathing, and it doesn't do the dishes." It sounds a lot like my partner. The back tag says, "Their luck's about to go down the drain." And I like this little tag because it gives us a clue for what's in store for Kat in this book. This also seems like a good time to mention before I forget that this book was named after the 1955 movie It Came From Beneath the Sea, which doesn't look nearly as exciting as the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, one of Stine's other book inspirations, but this one still looks fun.
A tidal wave of terror engulfs the screen as a raging monster from the dawn of creation attacks the world of man. West Coast reels under Holocaust as the men and weapons of the atomic age battle to the death against the ageless monster of the deep.
Now let's read this blurb on the back. Kat and her brother Daniel are so lucky. They just moved into a new house with tons of rooms, 2 balconies, and the lawn the size of a football field. But all that good luck's about to run out, because there's something really evil living in their new house. Something that's moving, watching, waiting. Something that comes from beneath the kitchen sink. Okay, now let's start the summary. The book opens with our introduction to Katrina Merton, aka Kat, or as her father likes to call her, Kitty Cat. Kat has just moved into a new house and lets us know that this is the start of a sad, frightening story. I'm intrigued because I don't recall any sad elements to this story, and the only Goosebumps story I would classify as sad is The Ghost Next Door. We also get to meet Killer, the family Cocker Spaniel. I'm glad that Stine's getting back to his roots with this sudden resurgence in Cocker Spaniels. Killer's a bit of a misnomer though, because he's apparently afraid of everything, and his name is the result of our annoying little brother for this story, Daniel. This new house they're moving into is 3 stories tall and sounds like a full-on mansion, complete with a massive backyard and wraparound porches. Kat tries to humble it a bit by saying that it's old with crooked shutters, but I'm not convinced. Kat's room is on the 2nd floor and even has its own private balcony. Kat's like those people who insist they grew up middle class but lived in houses like this. Daniel is pissed and wants to know why Kat gets the room with the balcony. His mom is able to console him by letting him know he gets something special too: bunk beds. This would not soothe my jealousy in the slightest, but it makes Daniel happy because his bestie Carlo can sleep over all the time now. This book is feeling like a throwback to the first few Goosebumps books in a lot of ways, because we have a lot of the essential Goosebumps elements: moving into a new house, a Cocker Spaniel, an annoying younger sibling, lots of parent interaction, and a very blunt character description in the first few pages. I even look like my father, tall and thin with a lot of freckles and reddish hair. I usually wear my hair in a ponytail. Dad doesn't have much hair to worry about. Daniel looks more like my mother. Straight light brown hair that's always falling in his eyes, and what mom calls a sturdy build. That means he's chunky. We have a sudden, very 90s moment where Daniel pulls out a super soaker and proceeds to douse his sister. They chase each other around the yard for a bit before getting to work on unpacking the house. Kat heads inside to the kitchen to start scrubbing out cabinets. While working, she hears a squeak from under the sink. She goes to investigate, and as she's slowly opening the cabinet door, a dark hairy claw pops out, grabs her, and won't let go in a chapter cliffhanger. It turns out Daniel is a little practical joker, which bodes well for It's a Prank Row numbers, and has been hiding under the sink in his rat costume. I love that 1, he even has a rat costume, and 2, that he proceeded to sit under this sink in a rat costume for who knows how long just to scare Kat. I admire the commitment. Kat beats on Daniel for a bit while chastising him for scaring her, when suddenly he shouts, "Look out, there's a real rat!" This again scares Kat and she jumps up on a chair. except this is only Killer coming to see what all the commotion was about. Daniel is feeling very pleased with himself with 2 successful rat scares under his belt. Kat again begins beating on her brother when Killer is suddenly very interested in something under the sink. Kat investigates and finds Killer freaking out over what appears to be a little round brown sponge. Kat snatches the sponge from the dog and then notices that this thing is just a little bit bigger than an egg and that it appears to be breathing. This startles her and she chucks it back under the sink. Daniel thinks this is just a lame attempt to scare him back and isn't buying it. Just then their mom enters the room, and when Kat tells her that she found a living sponge under the sink, all she gets is a "that's nice dear" in response. To be fair, if I was busy unpacking, I wouldn't have time for sentient sponges either. Killer starts growling at the sponge again, which leads Daniel into thinking maybe this sponge is actually interesting. He also decides now is the time for a game of keep away and proceeds to snatch up the sponge. This is short-lived though, because in a chapter cliffhanger, Daniel lets out a blood-curdling scream of pain. I thought the sponge bit him or something, but no, Daniel just whacked his head on the sink. Actually, he thinks Kat pushed him into the sink. His screams draw the attention of their mom again, and she shoots at both of them for fighting over an old sponge of all things. She sends Daniel out of the room, which gives Kat some one-on-one time with the sponge, and she immediately begins confiding with it for some reason. It's also notable that she points out that everyone started fighting when in the presence of this little potato man. She examines the creature closer, and she realizes she can feel its little heartbeat. She pushes back some of the wrinkly skin and sees 2 wet little black eyes staring at her beneath the folds. Honestly, at this point, I would no longer be holding this thing in case it had teeth. Kat decides she needs to show it to an adult and finds her father in the hallway working on the lights. Her father is more intrigued by the idea of a living potato than the mom was and asks to take a closer look at it. He reaches for it from the ladder, but in a chapter cliffhanger he takes a tumble off the ladder and has the hallway light come crashing down on his head. It turns out her dad broke his ankle, and when she turns from fetching him a glass of water, she learns that her dad thinks she pushed the ladder over. Kat can't believe her own father would accuse her of doing such a thing and is very hurt by this. She also steals a hold of the little sentient sponge and notices that it's no longer just pulsating gently, but throbbing wildly like it's full on purring with excitement. This little sponge is clearly here for violence and drama. Kat also reflects on how her brother and now her father both have accused her of intentionally hurting them for no reason. Kat isn't fucking around at this point and throws the little lump into the trash can outside. We then jump to 2 days later and Kat is planning out her upcoming birthday when she overhears Daniel bragging about his prehistoric sponge creature to his friend Carlo. It turns out Daniel and Larry from My Hairiest Adventure have a lot in common and both partake in the occasional dumpster dive. Kat reveals she did some encyclopedia research and learned that sponges don't have eyes and can't survive outside the water more than 30 minutes, so whatever this creature is, it isn't a sponge. So she thinks Daniel needs to stop messing with it. Daniel thinks this could be a special super sponge and does not plan on leaving it alone anytime soon. Kat convinces Daniel and Carlo to at least put it in an old gerbil cage until they can figure out what the hell this thing is. As Carlo is lowering it into the cage, he starts screaming that it ate his hand in a chapter cliffhanger. Once again, this is just a prank, and I'm left wanting this thing to actually bite someone. Daniel and Carlo pester Kat for a bit longer, and just before leaving the room, Carlo starts shrieking in pain for real this time. He pulls off his shoe, and Kat sees his sock turning red with blood, because old Carlo has stepped on a nail. As she clogs the wound with a dirty old t-shirt, she sees the sponge vibrating with joy in the gerbil cage. At this point, Kat is realizing there's some sort of correlation going on with bad luck in this sponge, which is pretty impressive considering we're only on page 26. We hop to the next day, and we're 1 day closer to Kat's 12th birthday. We learn she's too old now for themed birthdays and will be going to Wonder Park for an entire day with 5 of her best friends. Also, sound the alarm, because I think we have our first confirmed case of vomit count, because we learned that Carlo puked all over the roller coaster the last time they went to Wonder Park. It took 30 books, so literally halfway through the series, but we finally have 1 instance of confirmed vomit. Granted, I thought these books had a lot more of it, but whatever, I'm calling this a victory. Kat reveals she's bringing the sponge monster to school so she can show it to the science teacher. This scenario happened in Gremlins, and look how well that turned out for them. She sticks it in an old Tupperware and punches some holes in the top so it can breathe. On the way to school, Kat suddenly hears a loud crack from above, but is frozen with fear in a chapter cliffhanger. At the last second, Daniel knocks her out of the way before she can get thwacked by a falling tree branch. She turns to see the potato monster throbbing wildly and breathing harder than ever than she's ever seen it before. This little goblin is clearly out for her blood. Once at school, she finally gets to show her little monster to the science teacher, but to Kat's dismay, it presents itself as a dried up sponge. The teacher gets annoyed with Kat, and Kat returns to her seat defeated. The evil sponge isn't done yet though, because once class gets started, the teacher smashes her fingers in the desk drawer, breaking them. After walking her teacher down to the nurse's office, she comes across Daniel, who reveals he's figured out what this mystery sponge actually is. He pulls out an encyclopedia of the weird from under his shirt and shows the section on gruels. We then learn all about this evil potato monster. The gruel is an ancient and mythical creature. The gruel does not eat food or drink water. Instead, it gets its strength from luck. Bad luck. The gruel has always been known as a bad luck charm. It feeds on the bad luck of other people. The gruel becomes stronger each time something bad happens around it. Bad luck for the gruel owner never ends. The gruel cannot be killed, by force or by any violent means. and it cannot ever be given away or tossed aside. A gruel is only passed on to a new owner when an owner dies. Anyone who gives the gruel away will die within 1 day. This little gruel means trouble, and we can only assume it killed the previous owners of the house would be my thought, and Cat had the unfortunate luck of becoming its next owner. Also, in case you were curious like me, this is a mythical creature Stein made up all on his own, because I wanted to know if there was some sort of established legend going on here. We also learned about the cousin of the gruel, the lynx, for reasons to be revealed later. The lynx is the cousin of the gruel, but it is much more dangerous. Once the lynx latches onto someone, it never lets go, until it has drained every drop of energy from that person. Cat returns to class and sees that the sponge is nice and wet from the smashed fingers incident. The gruel is into sadism apparently. On the return home, Cat, Daniel, and Carla are stopped by the mom who lets them know that she has some very bad news. Killer has run away, but fear not, she's notified the police and they're out searching for him. I want to know what fantasy police Stein knows, because where I live, you could barely get the cops to come out if you've been straight up robbed and need a report for an insurance claim. Yet these ones are out looking for lost pets. Daniel and Carlo take off in search of Killer, while Cat storms up to her bedroom to interrogate the gruel. She decides to play bad cop and chucks it at the wall, and when she slams her hand back down, she cries out in pain in a chapter cliffhanger. She looks down and sees blood, because she slammed her hand right into a pair of scissors and cut her hand deep. This book has had actual blood in it, which we don't encounter very often in Goosebumps. She wraps her bleeding hand and notices that the gruel is full on giggling at her and turns from pink to bright red. This gruel is very, very excited. Some might even say rock hard. Daniel and Carlo return, and despite knowing that this thing is a gruel, Carlo still wants to borrow it for reasons unexplained. Cat is like, sure, take this godforsaken thing away from me, but Daniel has to remind her that if she gives it away, she'll die in 1 day. Cat isn't fully convinced, but decides to not risk it, and sends Carlo away without the gruel. She then lays on her bed simmering in gruel hatred. The next morning, Cat awakens to thunder, lightning, and pouring rain, which can only mean one thing: her birthday trip to Wonder Park has been cancelled. To make matters worse, she can't even have an indoor party at the house because they have painters scheduled. Cat angrily retreats to her room and begins writing up some plans on how to dispose of the gruel. Once it stops raining, Cat and Daniel head outside and spend a chapter digging a grave for the gruel. The level of detail and work described in digging this hole would lead you to believe that they're digging a hole 6 feet deep, but in the end it's only as deep as Cat's arm. She chucks the gruel in and covers up the hole, only to turn around and discover that Daniel is now gone. Turns out he was just hiding behind the garage in case the gruel blew up or something. Good survival instincts, Daniel. They race inside and prepare for some birthday cake. Cat goes to blow out her candles and wishes for Killer's safe return when she's startled by a loud pop from the kitchen and a chapter ending. This was just the mom opening a bottle of sparkling cider in a very out-of-place attempt at a chapter cliffhanger. Cat has a great birthday full of 90s classic gifts, like a Walkman and some CDs. She goes to bed, and when she awakens, she looks at the backyard and sees that everything back there has dried up and died. All the grass, flowers, and yard work her father has done is now dead. Cat feels as if she has no choice but to dig up the gruel. I think I would have just left it there anyways, honestly. The dad could put down bark or something. She finds the gruel, and it's busy throbbing away from brown to pink to red because it's having a grand time. As Cat is racing back up the stairs, she trips and slams her knee, which results in the gruel giggling at her from her pocket. She squeezes it as hard as she can before chucking it into the gerbil cage and vowing to destroy it. Cat heads back downstairs, and it's revealed that her Aunt Louise is coming tomorrow. Cat is stoked because she thinks her aunt is just the coolest. She wears flowery dresses, drives a yellow convertible, does tarot cards, and knows all about astrology, so Cat is hopeful that this esoteric knowledge extends to gruels. The next afternoon, Cat greets her aunt after school and immediately drags her upstairs to meet the gruel. Cat is of course disappointed when the gruel pretends to just be a regular dried out old sponge, and her aunt thinks she's just playing a joke on her. Once her aunt leaves the room, Cat is fuming. This results in the gruel thumping back to life, thrilled with Cat's distress. Cat then grabs her heaviest textbook and slams it on top of the gruel while screaming, "Die, please die!" She stops to see the damage she's done, and she's excited to see the gruel is shredded into many little brown and pink pieces. This excitement is short-lived though, because the pieces begin to shake and then slowly roll towards each other, and then begin to reassemble into the gruel. The gruel then decides to giggle at her some more, and then Kate throws herself onto her bed again in despair. She's awoken by Daniel the next day, letting her know she's late for school and needs to get a move on. This turns out to be a prank because it's actually a no-school day due to one of Stein's teacher conferences that seems to fill the Goosebumps universe. Cat spends the afternoon missing Killer and worrying about the gruel, while Daniel and Carlo play video games. She notices it's suddenly a little too quiet and discovers Carlo is now gone, and so is the gruel. For some reason, she thinks the gruel escaped before it becomes obvious that Carlo stole it. She then freaks out at the prospect of dying in 1 day without the gruel. I would think having the gruel get stolen wouldn't count as giving it away, so Carlo can be the new cursed owner, but I guess not. Cat and Daniel race to the park because they think Carlo will be there showing off the gruel, and on the way they stumble across Carlo sprawled out in the middle of the street, face first. They investigate further, and we see that he's all scraped up from a nasty bike crash, and we get another mention of blood, because Daniel does not do well with blood and can't even look at Carlo. He reveals that the gruel was in his bike basket, and when Kate goes to retrieve it, it's gone. They search the area and finally conclude it must have rolled into the sewer. Kate lifts the sewer grate and heads on down. Once down there, she's overwhelmed with the stink and can barely see anything, but she thinks she can hear the girl panting in the dark. She ventures further into the sewer when she suddenly sees several pairs of glowing eyes staring at her. Kate then hears scurrying all around her and feels something furry brush past her leg and decides it's time to get the fuck out of there. She races in the dark to the ladder and wonders if it's rats or raccoons all around her. Once above ground, Daniel declares he's spotted the gruel, but this is another false alarm and all he's found is a paper bag. Kat begins to spiral a bit and starts to imagine her parents mourning the loss of their daughter and pictures Daniel having to walk to school alone due to her untimely demise. Carlo interrupts these death thoughts with a sudden idea. He thinks maybe the kids he was racing on his bike when he crashed could have picked up the gruel and pedaled off. Why these kids would have picked up a random sponge is beyond me, but it's page 88 and this book is losing its momentum a bit, so let's go find this gruel. They get to the park, and to everybody's collective horror, it's not just kids who now have the gruel, it's high schoolers. Kat walks up to the group and politely asks for her favorite sponge back, which, shockingly, is not well received. The high schoolers begin to taunt Kat and say, no, it's actually their favorite sponge and they won't be giving it back. She then decides to change tactics and tries to warn them that the sponge is evil and that they'll be sorry. Again, shocker, this doesn't work. The lead high schooler stuffs the gruel in his back pocket and takes his turn at bat. He's then immediately beamed in the head with a baseball and knocked to the ground unconscious. The gruel rolls out of his pocket and Kat seizes the opportunity to snatch it up, but before she can get to it, another high schooler takes the time to pick up the gruel and chuck it across the park. Even though really he should be attending to his friend's head wound. They get the gruel back, and while pedaling home, Kat can see it's pulsating harder than ever. It's now turning from red to black because it really likes head injuries. It's also probably been hard for longer than 4 hours, and should probably see a doctor before necrosis sets in. Kat pedals fast as she can, despite just witnessing what the gruel did to Carlos on his bike. We then end the chapter with a black and silver truck speeding directly at Kat. She's able to dodge the truck, but only by a foot, and crashes and rolls into a yard. She then has to awkwardly apologize to the driver for almost killing her. She immediately gets back on her bike and again begins pedaling like a maniac home. Kat, I'm losing faith in you at this point. She then runs over a glass bottle, which causes her to crash again. Maybe try walking, Kat. Kat snaps a bit and starts smashing the gruel with her bike until Daniel stops her and points out all she's doing is making the gruel happy, because now it's blood red, pulsating happily and chuckling to itself. Once finally back at home, Kat marches the gruel to the kitchen sink and proceeds to jam it into the garbage disposal. She shreds the gruel and declares it defeated once and for all, except Carlo points out she may have celebrated a little too soon because the gruel bobs back out of the sink in one piece. This time the gruel's an angry purple, and Kat snatches it up and squeezes it as hard as she can. The gruel gets hotter and hotter the harder she squeezes it until she finally burns her and she has to drop it. Daniel goes to retrieve the Encyclopedia of the Weird to check if there's anything they might have missed. He reviews the cannot be killed by force or any violent means part, and hopefully gets this conclusion rolling. Kat feels inspired and lovingly picks up the gruel and begins singing it a lullaby, telling it how cute it is and how much she loves it. At first Daniel thinks she's lost her goddamn mind, but then notices the more she tells it she loves it, the calmer it becomes. The gruel stops pulsating and turns from purple to red and back to a pale brown. She finally leans down and kisses the gruel, which results in it turning to brown dust that Kat blows away. Kat then restates what just happened in case it wasn't obvious. The gruel loved pain and anger, so it was only natural love and kindness would kill it. They decide to celebrate with ice cream, but just before leaving they hear familiar breathing right outside the door. They assume the gruel is back in the chapter cliffhanger, but ends up just being killer, because we can't forget about the Cocker Spaniel and still have it be a happy ending. Kat also notices that the backyard is back to full life, and that all the evil from the gruel seems to be undone. They celebrate with ice cream and recoil at the sponge that the waitress uses to wipe down the tables. Once back at home, Kat goes to feed Killer dinner, but he's preoccupied and growling at the cabinet beneath the kitchen sink. She tries to reassure Killer that the gruel is gone by opening the cabinet, only for Killer to grab something with his mouth. Kat takes the mystery object from Killer and is relieved to find it's only a potato. That is until the potato suddenly bites her in a last page twist. That's right, poor Kat's kitchen sink is on some sort of like hell mouth from like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so now she has to deal with the lynx from earlier. And that's the end. We're back to having a direct episode pairing this week, although it's pretty different from the book. Our notable actor is going to be Katharine Isabelle, who played Kat. Katharine has been in a lot of great movies and TV shows since Goosebumps, but my favorite has to be the werewolf classic Ginger Snaps. Let's start the episode. My first thought would not be, oh, it's a kitty with glowing red eyes like this.
Oh, it's a kitty.
This is definitely the kind of sponge I pictured as a kid.
You were scared by a sponge?
I like that we have the sponge crawling around in the episode. I really wanted her to put that evil sponge right on her face. I think I want a replica of this evil potato monster. Uh-oh, looks like we're getting some stunt work. Hey, that's Saber.
Scared? Nah.
I'm always here for an X-Files reference.
See, what did I tell you, huh? This is better than the X-Files. What are you gonna do with it?
I like the noises the Gruel's making.
You're right. Forget science. It needs to be dead.
Someone spray painted our yard.
What happened? Everything's dying.
I love a good school science scene.
Aha. Just as I suspected. It's a sponge.
I don't know. It moves around a lot. All this bad stuff's been happening. Look. No. But this thing is weird. It has eyes and everything.
The sponge took this man out. I kind of thought they were going to pour acid all over this girl.
Danger. Acid.
The Gruel hates shitty stock music too.
Look at the gruel. It's shrinking. Why? What's happening? I don't think it likes the music.
You don't know the words to You Are My Sunshine, Cat?
It's growing again. You've got to do something. What? Sing the song, Cat. Sing. I don't know the words.
We have chemical warfare as the solution in this version.
Uh-oh. Look at the chemicals. What's that smell? It's growing again.
Got this under control.
Cool, a trunk.
I like that she keeps the Gruel in a happy box.
Good morning, Gruely. Another beautiful day.
I don't think Killer actually likes Cat.
A potato?
Overall, I thought It Came From Beneath the Sink was a really solid Goosebumps book. I enjoyed our protagonist Cat and the dynamic between her, Daniel, and Carlo. I thought it had some fun ideas with the Gruel changing colors with the more destruction and pain it caused. I also liked how the Gruel did actual damage in this book, like our characters were getting injured every 5 pages as a result of this thing. It was also one of the shorter Goosebumps books with only 112 pages, which I think worked in its favor by keeping the story tight. I'm gonna give this one 5 out of 5 potatoes. I really liked this one as a kid, and it held up for me now. Okay, on to our totals. It Came From Beneath the Sink didn't have any shoulder scares or It's Only a Dreams, but it did have a little of everything else. In Getting Jiggy with the 90s, we had 4 90s moments. These included Super Soakers, Encyclopedias, a Discman, and CDs. This raises our Goosebumps total to 112 jiggy 90s moments. In It's a Prank Bro, I counted 4 pranks. We had Daniel in a rat costume under the sink, a rat scare via Killer, a fake-up sponge bite, and Daniel making Kat think she was late for school on teacher conference day. This brings our series total to 61 It's a Prank Bros. Asshole Victim makes another appearance this week. This time we have the Gruel smashing a high schooler's head in via baseball. That's what you get for stealing shit. This raises our Asshole Victims to 19. It Came From Beneath the Sink had quite a few chapter cliffhangers with a total of 16, and I thought they were pretty good overall with a wide variety of scares and injuries. This raises our Goosebumps total to 365, one for each day of the year. The Clunky Cliffhanger award for this book goes to 13 and 14, when Kat gets scared by a sudden bottle pop on her birthday. It feels really random and out of place compared to the rest of the cliffhangers in this book. Vomit count. It took 30 frickin' books, but we finally have confirmed vomit in at least one of these stories. Carlo apparently hurled all over the roller coaster at Wonder Park, so Cuddles finally gets to add 1 to our total. This brings our series total to 1. Shocker ending. Our big twist to this story is right after Kat defeats the Gruel, Killer pulls out a lynx from under the sink, which proceeds to bite Kat. This raises our Goosebumps total to 24. Well, that's it for It Came From Beneath the Sink. I liked this book quite a bit, largely because I love the idea of an evil, sentient potato sponge monster wreaking havoc on children. Next week we have Night of the Living Dummy 2, which I'm looking forward to because I'm ready for a Slappy-centric story, not a Mr. Wood fake-out. Hopefully Slappy has moved past his love for calling people slaves. Let me know in the comments what you thought of It Came From Beneath the Sink. Are you a fan, or did I overhype it? Would you fear a throbbing red potato? And what did you think of my various little monster clips this week? Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,